Hello and welcome. This is my cooking show and it is called Ravenous Romans with Isabel Paulos. So in today's episode of Ravenous Romans, I will be making 3 dishes. The first dish I will make is called a gustaccio, which is the Latin word for appetizer. And the appetizer I will make is called globuli, and it's basically fried cheese. The second dish I'll be making today is our entree following the appetizer, and entree in Latin is prima mensa, which generally translates to around first meal or main meal. So this entree I'll be making today is ova spongia ex lacte, which in English just translates to honey with eggs. So yes, I'm making honey with eggs. I know that honey and eggs definitely doesn't sound like a complex recipe. It is not. Very simple. Just like you're making eggs for breakfast in the morning. But eggs and honey were 2 very popular staples in ancient Roman cooking. Actually, honey is featured in every single dish I'm making today. So I'll look forward to that. Every dish required some sort of sweet or sour aftertaste, and so that's why honey is so common in these dishes. It was locally produced, plus it tastes really good. Our last dish that we'll be making today is our wonderful dessert. Now, dessert in Latin is secunda mensa, which means generally second meal or the meal after the entree. Now, our secunda mensa today is an ancient Roman cheesecake called libum. Now, libum isn't your normal cheesecake that you would imagine right now in your head. It is more like a bun form, and it was only served at wealthy banquets. And if it wasn't served at a banquet, it was served for sacrificial purposes. For example, if I were a Roman cook, I would make this cheesecake and put it on my altar or lilarium in my Roman villa to serve to the household spirits. The word libum translates to cake in English, and like I mentioned earlier, this dessert has a honey coating on top of it, which just brings out the sweet taste and goes for a perfect dessert in ancient Rome. Now it is time to start cooking our Roman dishes. Now we have to drain the cheese. This process allows us to squeeze excess moisture out. This is the flour we have to mix with the cheese. Now we have the right consistency that we want for the fried cheese. Alright, so now we have our shapes that we want them to be and the size we want them to be. So now we have to pour the oil in the pan and fry them. We tested if the oil was ready or not by just dropping a little bit in there. And it's clearly ready, so let's go. So let's get to it. This is gonna be our lucky first customer in, oh my god, in a shop. Okay. Oh my lord. Hold on. I'm adding this clip because you should know that you should never do that, and I did it completely wrong. So this is pretty successful. Don't worry, I'm fine. Let's flip it over. Okay. Looking pretty good so far. I'm still the best chef in the world, though. Our first cheese ball is done. Scrumptious. We are all done with our frying. So don't forget to turn the stove off. And now since we have fried our globuli, now the next step and the very last step is to roll them in honey. Have our long-awaited appetizer. So I say, let's try it. We're gonna choose this one right here. Those are pretty good. I would say the taste gets kind of boring after the honey goes away because then it's just flour and cheese. But nevertheless, I like the texture. The sweetness does add a lot to it. I'm gonna have another one because it actually is pretty good.
Guys,
Okay, pick one.
Let me tell you about abdominal
Pick one! Pick one! Yay!
I feel like a Roman.
Good. I'd like to conclude that our first appetizer and dish of this show is successful. Woo! Now we're going to set these aside and start making our entree. First, we're going to go in with a little fact break. When did the Romans eat? Well, the Romans ate one main meal a day called the cena, and the cena was eaten probably around midday or noon, sometime around there. Other snacks in the Roman day were considered a meal because they consisted of smaller portions of food and not as fancy types of food, unlike the cena. Despite that, the cena was considered the main meal because it had 3 courses, like I mentioned before. The appetizer, the entree, and the dessert. Okay, we're gonna skip to the future for a second. This video is recorded after I made the eggs, and I failed miserably. It failed horribly. Like, it smelled and it just did not look very edible. So we are restarting over with the same ingredients and everything like that. Just tuning it down a little bit. But troubleshooting is the most important part of cooking. So I'm basically the best chef ever.
That doesn't look very right to me. Plus, it like already keeps breaking apart, so it's not gonna be an omelet.
We will try over again. So where's my surround set? Perfect. Here's what I was looking for. 3 eggs. Mix. We are going to fast forward.
Look what Isabel has done. She did it. I don't know what noise it's making, but I think it's okay. So, yeah.
So I was reaching for a plate, and all of a sudden my hand was gripped and I died. Anyway. Okay, so after all that, I don't know what to describe it. We are finally done with our stupid omelet, and we're gonna pour some honey on it because it is honey and eggs. So let's just do that right now. I also added black pepper to the eggs because that's what the recipe called for. In conclusion, I did not film the part of me eating it, and the black pepper did not taste good with the honey, and so I rated it a 3 out of 10, and it was terrible. Where did the Romans eat? Well, the Romans usually ate outdoors. Maybe on fancy occasions they would eat in their garden or their horto. But on usual days, they would dine in their dining room or tricliniums. How did the Romans eat? Well, the Romans surprisingly ate with their fingers. Even the wealthy Romans ate with their fingers. Spoons and knives were used for foods that were hard to grab or cut through, and foods that were liquid. The Romans also ate sitting up like we do, or laying down. Usually that was for fancier occasions, but any wealthy Roman could just sit down on a sofa and have someone feed them. What did the Romans eat? Well, it depended on your social class. If you were a poor Roman, you would usually eat porridge or any sort of liquidy soup that consisted of water and wheat or barley and some vegetables. The poor Romans never really had much meat consisting in their meals, and they usually ate just some forms of bread and soup. If you were a middle-class Roman, you had a much wider variety to different foods, such like eggs or cheese or bread or some fish. If you were a wealthy Roman, you had a lot of variety of foods to eat. You would have an all-you-can-eat buffet every single night. You would have exotic foods at banquets, such as jellyfish, parrot, flamingo, ostrich, and snails, and lamb brains, which just sounds so delicious. You also had a more variety of vegetables like cabbage, asparagus, garlic, beans, and onions. Don't forget that if you're a wealthy Roman, with every meal you must have your vinum, or wine. Rich Romans usually had red wine, and middle-class Romans usually had white wine. So now, after that interesting adventure, it is a new day, and we now are making the Roman cheesecake, which I'm very excited. So first we're going to preheat the oven to 375, and wait for that to start, and then now we have all of our ingredients that were needed. So first we have honey, of course, 1 egg, beaten, flour, ricotta cheese, bay leaves. Now, the very first step is to sift the flour. So here we have our sifter and our half cup of flour. And so I'm just gonna, there we go. Now we have to add the cheese, 1 cup of ricotta cheese, into our flour mixture. I'm just gonna move that. Here is what that looks like. Now we add the beaten egg into our mixture. Now we need to divide the dough into our now cheesecake. We have our bun-shaped cheesecake-ish thing. And the recipe also calls to put bay leaves underneath the cheesecake, so I'm going to do that. So now we have put all of the leaves under the cheesecake. Now that our cheesecake is in the oven, it is supposed to bake for 35 to 40 minutes, so we'll check back on that really soon. In the meantime, let's have a fact break. If you were a kid in ancient Roman times, you would have small servings of bread, fish, and vegetables, mainly a healthy diet, and whatever rotated around your mother's cooking. Wait, who cooked this food, and where was it cooked? Well, Roman food was cooked in a culina, or a kitchen. It was cooked over special troughs with beds of flaming charcoal or in a clay oven. If you wanted to refrigerate your food, you would grab your food, put it in a clay container, and put it in a nearby well. If you were super rich, you would have a cook, also known as a coquus. Commonly, food was cooked for sacrificial purposes or for serving your family. There are 2 major cookbooks dated back all the way from ancient Rome, 5th century, that really influenced our understanding of Roman diet and food. So the first cookbook I'm discussing today is Apicius de Re Quocinaria. It was made by Apicius, and he was a royal cook and merchant who experimented with his food and tried out new recipes. The next cookbook to talk about is the De Agricultura, which meant cultivation of the field, and it was created by Cato, a consul, statesman, soldier, and farmer who created recipes from his variety of food, which is much different from Apicius's. He had more farm-related recipes that came from local places. Okay, so it has 10 minutes left to bake, and you can clearly see it rose, and you can see the bay leaves, and I think it looks pretty good. So this is our cheesecake. I know it is deflating right now. It is perfectly normal. That's what happens. I'm going to put the honey on a plate, and then once it cools down a little more, then we're going to flip it over and wait till the honey has absorbed, and then serve it. And I will not break the plate this time. So now our cheesecake has cooled. I removed some of the bay leaves, and now we're going to transfer it to the plate over there that will have honey on it. All right, so the honey is now warm. So I'm just gonna put it right here, and let's take this and flip it over. So I'm going to grab something like this and transfer our amazing cheesecake. This came smoothly off of the pan. Obviously, with different hands. And then we're going to flip it onto the thing. And don't worry, it looks very flat right now, but it's okay. Alright. So our cheesecake is soaked in the honey, so now we're just going to That looks scrumptious. Okay. Here is the final result. Now we are going to try a bite of this delicious cheesecake. Here is what the inside looks like. The texture is very smooth, and the honey really adds a lot to it. I really like how, like, it's not crispy, but it's like the right texture that I would imagine for like this Roman cheesecake. I like how it's different from other cheesecakes, and I rate this a 10 out of 10. It's really good. That was my Roman project. I'm so glad you guys got the chance to watch it. I hope you learned more about Roman cooking and the ways of the life that the Romans lived. And thanks for watching.